The whistle didn't cry like some stories say. It coughed low and tired like it had run too many miles through too many winters. The station sat quiet, shivering under a sky the color of tin. Not snowing yet, but close, and folks felt it. They hunched deeper in their coats, their voices short breath, fogging and vanishing between words that didn't matter much. He stood near the edge of the platform, not close enough to seem desperate, not far enough to hide disinterest. A widower's stance. His boots were scuffed, but polished hat brim bent just right, and his badge, though dulled by time, still caught what little light the morning offered. He looked like the kind of man you wouldn't ask questions to, even if you wanted to. The ticket in his pocket was first class, bought by a favor owed, and a reputation long earned. But it might as well have been blank. He hadn't used comfort in years. Didn't know what to do with it now. He'd planned to ride quiet nap between towns. Maybe nod to an old friend if he saw one. But truth was, he was leaving nothing behind and heading toward less. He wasn't running. That would have taken more feeling than he had left. No, this was just movement. A man keeping his boots from rusting still. That's when he saw her. She didn't arrive with noise. No wagon, no fanfare. She stepped off a freight cart like she belonged nowhere and knew it. Her coat was too thin for the weather. One hand clutched a stitched-together satchel. The other rested gently on the curve of her belly, heavy with child, though she walked like she carried nothing. Her eyes scanned the crowd but didn't seem to search for anyone. The station master glanced at her, once then turned away like she were smoke instead of bone. Folks do that sometimes, pretend you don't exist if your story don't fit their hour. He watched her try to board, watched her pause in front of the first-class car. The conductor shook his head before she asked, said something under his breath. She didn't flinch. Just stepped back. There were other seats, cracked leather benches where folks spat near their boots and snored open-mouthed. She didn't move toward them either. Just stood still, a hand over her side, like something inside had kicked too hard. He didn't think about it. Just walked up beside her and said low as a church bell, "Take mine." She looked up. Her lashes were dusted with frost. There was surprise in her face, but no gratitude yet. That came slower, like all real things do. "You sure?" she asked. He nodded once. "Reckon I am." Then he tipped his hat and stepped back before she could say more. She watched him board the back like she was memorizing the path he took in case she had to follow one day. Inside, the warmth hit like a slap. Smoke whiskey breath, pine tar. The stove wheezed in the corner. A boy no older than 16 offered him a half-chewed licorice rope. He declined. She passed by an hour later. She didn't stop, but she paused just long enough to set something beside him wrapped in cloth, warm half a biscuit. No note. No name. He didn't touch it. Just stared out the window watching the land roll by. Flat, gold, distant. Like time itself had stretched it thin. The train slowed unexpectedly 2 towns over. Word passed that a fallen pine had bent the tracks. They'd stop for the night. A murmur moved through the car. Annoyance. Mostly, men with schedules, women with babies. No one looked thrilled. He stepped off and pulled his coat tight, scanning for her without knowing why. Maybe just to be sure she wasn't cold. Maybe because he hadn't looked after anyone in far too long. There she was, seated on a bench near the feed store, hands folded across her lap like a hymn she didn't dare sing. He approached slow. "There's rooms at the inn," he said. "I'll pay the front desk. You need rest." She didn't argue, just nodded, rose, and followed. Her silence said more than thanks. He handed coins to the innkeeper, took the key, and placed it in her palm. "I'll sleep in the barn," he added. She opened her mouth like she might protest, but her pride caught the words before they fell. That night the storm came. He lay beneath hay, the wind howling through the cracks in the boards like wolves calling out names of the dead. He didn't sleep, not because of cold. He'd slept colder, but because something in his bones felt different, restless, like he'd been nudged back into a life he thought he'd finished. She came just before midnight, a lantern in one hand and a bundle in the other. "You'll freeze," she said. Her voice was softer now. The wind had knocked the hardness out of it. She handed him a cloth-wrapped parcel. Warm cornbread. He stared at it like it was gold. "I made too much," she added, though they both knew that was a lie. He ate slow, careful. Let the taste remind him of kitchens he used to know. "You law?" she asked. He nodded. "Was. Still wear the badge." Don't mean much no more. She didn't answer, just sat beside him on a worn crate lantern flickering between them. He finally asked, "What's your story?" She looked at her hands. The nails were clean, but the skin was cracked, like she'd washed in cold water too many winters. Married once, she said. Man had wealth, but not enough heart. His kin said I shamed them. Called me barren. Then I got with child. They said it wasn't his. Threw me out before the leaves turned. He listened without blinking. Let the silence after her words be the place where truth lived. Sorry, he said. She shook her head. Not your doing. Still, he murmured. It's a shame how often women suffer because men can't carry their own sins. She looked at him then. Really looked. Not like a sheriff, not like a savior. Just a man, tired alone kind. You lost someone, she whispered. He nodded. My wife. Fever. Took her fast. They sat like that. Two ruined things sharing warmth. You headed somewhere? He asked. She took a long breath. Place where my family used to run rails. Thought maybe I'd start again. Maybe they'd remember my name. He didn't press, but a part of him stirred at her words. Rail families weren't common, and when they had daughters, those daughters weren't left to wander alone. The wind died down by dawn. She offered him the lantern back. He didn't take it. You keep it, he said. Never know when darkness shows up early. When the train hissed awake, she sat in first class again. He returned to the back. Only this time he held the biscuit and ate it slow like communion. He watched her through the window's reflection, a silhouette in blue chin, lifted hand on her belly, and for the first time in months he whispered something without bitterness in his voice. Lord, if you got plans, I'm listening. The train rolled forward. Neither knew their names yet. They stepped off the train just past sundown into a town that hadn't quite finished being built. Dust hovered like memory, clinging to boots and eyelashes, and the air smelled of pine and ash like trees had been felled to make room for the future. But the future hadn't yet arrived. The lawman walked slow, his hat pulled low eyes, scanning every shadow out of habit. She walked behind him, quiet, careful, the swell of her belly leading the way, as if it too carried secrets. They weren't meant to stop here. The pine that split across the rails still blocked the line ahead. The conductor had shrugged. One night, maybe two, depends on weather. He hadn't looked at her belly when he said it, just at the sky, like it might answer for him. The inn sat near the edge of town, tucked between a shuttered saloon and a broken telegraph pole. One flickering lantern hung from its porch, swinging as if unsure whether to stay or fall. He stepped inside first. The clerk barely looked up, only blinked when he placed $2 silver on the counter. Room for the lady, the lawman said. She needs a bed-warm one. The clerk squinted. And you, I got a coat, he said, and a barn nearby. The woman didn't argue, just stood beside him, hands resting gently beneath her ribs, her shoulders drawn back like someone who'd learned long ago not to flinch. The room was small, one narrow bed, a chip basin, a window that rattled. But it was dry, and the air inside smelled of old soap and lavender that had long since faded. She said nothing as she stepped inside, but when she turned, her eyes lingered a moment too long. He caught it. Not gratitude, not softness. Something else. Maybe confusion. Maybe the ache of being seen and not asked for anything in return. He left before she could speak. The barn leaned like an old man against the wind, its boards groaning with each gust. He rolled out a saddle blanket, pulled his coat tighter, and laid back on straw that smelled of mold and horses long gone. He watched the rafters shift above him, listened to the storm crackle in the distance. Somewhere, something rusted creaked like a ghost. He didn't sleep. He thought of her standing on the platform alone, with her hand over her child, standing like she belonged in a world that didn't want her. He thought of the way she hadn't begged, the way she'd offered him cornbread, like it was currency, the way her silence felt heavier than any confession. Just before midnight, the barn door creaked. She stepped in with a lantern wrapped in a blanket from the inn. You can't stay here, she said. Not sharply, not like command, more like someone who'd known cold before. It's just one night, he replied, not rising. She stepped closer, light swinging between them. You helped me without knowing why. Least I can do is make sure you don't freeze. He sat up slowly, brushing straw from his shoulders. You all right? He asked. Baby kicks, she said. Little warrior. Her voice was steadier tonight, a touch of steel beneath the softness. She set down a wrapped bundle between them. It smelled of stew and cornbread. Still warm. I talked the innkeeper into letting me use the stove, she said. He raised an eyebrow. You talked him into that? She gave a slow half smile. Some folk just need a reminder to do right. He took a bite without ceremony. It was better than anything he'd eaten in weeks. They sat on crates, sharing steam and silence. Wind howled through the gaps in the walls, but inside it was almost still. He glanced at her hands again, still cracked, still proud. You cook like someone who used to have a kitchen, he murmured. I did, she said. A fine one. Marble counters, gas stove, chandelier in the dining room. Didn't keep the cold out, though. He waited. My husband's family came from old blood. Railroad men, money layered thick. But they kept their knives behind smiles. She traced her finger over the wood between them. I married their son. Too fast. Too hopeful. He smiled like he meant it, and I didn't know better. Thought I'd earned safety. She looked at him then, not accusing, not begging. Just placing the truth gently on the table, like a letter never mailed. First child was lost, she said. They said it was a curse, that I came from dirt and brought bad roots. They never said it aloud. Not quite. Just looked at me like I'd cracked their mirror. And now I carry their heir, she said. This child they didn't want but would have claimed had I stayed. So I left before they could brand my belly as theirs. He didn't ask how she survived, didn't need to. Some women wear pain like armor. Others bury it beneath lace and lace smiles. She had done neither. She had simply kept walking. You ever go back? He asked. She shook her head. There's a town west of here. Tracks run through land my grandfather once owned. He died before they stole his name from the deeds. But I think his ghost still walks it. I'll find him there. Maybe stake a claim. He leaned back against the wall. Sounds like you got plans. More like a compass and a hope. Lightning flashed outside. The barn lit for a heartbeat. She didn't flinch. He noticed. You were sheriff when she asked. He nodded. Lawman. Before the badge lost meaning. I buried more friends than I jailed. Eventually I just kept the badge out habit. Still carry a gun holstered beside my regrets, he said. She chuckled, but it faded fast. They sat like that for a while. Wind rattled shingles. A horse neighed somewhere distant. You're not like most men, she said finally. He looked up. How's that? You didn't ask what I'd done. You didn't try to fix me. You didn't ask for anything in return. I've lost enough to know not everything's mine to carry, he said. She nodded, then stood. The lantern's light followed her. I'll leave the door open, she said, in case the dark gets too loud. She left before he could answer. In the morning, the sky was pearl-colored and the ground dusted in snow. The train still hadn't moved. He found her sitting on the porch of the inn, boots tucked beneath her, sipping something warm from a tin cup. She didn't look surprised when he approached. They say it'll be another day, she said. Maybe two. He glanced at the tracks, then back to her. My place ain't far. Stove works. Roof don't leak much. She looked at him quiet. You asking for company, I'm offering it, he said. She didn't speak right away. Then she stood slow as if testing the weight of the world again. Then let's go, she said. If you don't mind a woman who brings more questions than answers. I prefer questions, he said. Answers are usually lies dressed up too pretty. They left town just before noon, two figures heading toward the edge of the map. As they rode, a wind stirred behind them, not harsh, not cruel, just insistent. And somewhere down the line, tracks waited not just for trains, but for reckonings. The house sat low on the land, half swallowed by prairie grass and memory. A single stovepipe leaned skyward like a weary sentinel, and the porch sagged in the middle, as if it too had grown tired of holding itself upright. Wind moved through the bones of the place, not cruel, not wild, just constant like breath that didn't know how to stop. He hadn't brought a woman home since the day he buried the last one. She stepped down from the saddle with a slow, grace hand resting over her stomach. Her breath caught a moment as she took in the house, not because it was broken, though it was, but because something in its silence felt familiar. He pushed open the front door. It groaned like a hymn, long and aching. Inside, dust curled in the shafts of afternoon light. The stove waited cold, the walls bare, except for a faded calendar from 2 winters ago. A lone chair sat near the window facing nothing. "You sure?" she asked softly. "No," he said, "but I figure most things worth doing start there." She didn't smile, but she nodded. The first hour passed in small movements. She opened windows. He carried in kindling. Neither spoke much. She found an old rag and wiped the sill clean with slow circles, her breath turning into quiet hums. He listened from the doorway like it was a song he remembered from another life. She didn't ask where his wife had died. She didn't ask why there were no photographs. But she took note of the folded quilt in the trunk, the way the corners were worn. And when she found the cracked cup by the sink, she washed it and used it anyway. By evening, the house felt less like a mausoleum and more like a pause in the wind. He lit the fire. She baked bread. Wasn't sure I remembered how she said wiping flour on her skirt. He watched her, something catching behind his ribs. "You remember just fine." When the bread came out of the oven, the smell rolled through the rooms like forgiveness. She cut 2 slices and handed him one without asking if he was hungry. They sat across from each other, elbows resting on the wooden table. She asked about the field beyond the barn. "Used to grow beans," he said. Then grief. She didn't flinch, just nodded like she understood. Outside, coyotes howled at the moon. Inside, the child moved beneath her skin, shifting like a tide. Later that night, as he added logs to the fire, she stood near the mantel fingers, grazing an old tobacco tin. "You ever think of selling?" she asked. He shrugged. "Once. But no one wants a house that remembers the dead." She looked around then, back at him. Or maybe they just don't know how to speak kindly to ghosts. They slept in separate rooms. His door stayed ajar. Hers closed softly behind her. And somewhere between midnight and morning, he heard her crying through the wall. Soft, muffled, not the kind that begged attention, but the kind that refused to stay buried. He didn't knock, just whispered her name into the dark, hoping it reached her. The days passed slow, like honey over cold bread. She tended the front steps, swept dust from the floor, found fabric in the cellar, and sewed it into curtains. Pale blue. They fluttered in the breeze like small, brave flags. One afternoon, she stood barefoot on the porch, scanning the sky. "Storm's coming," she said. "Always is," he replied. That night it arrived. Rain like nails, wine like teeth. She lit a lantern and placed it on the windowsill. He watched from the corner, hands curled around his coffee. "Why do that?" he asked. "For the one still out there," she said. "Even if it's just wind." The next morning the roof leaked near the pantry. She fetched a bucket, then set to patching it with old cloth and candle wax. "You don't have to fix everything," he said. Maybe, she answered. But someone should try. He offered her his coat that evening. She draped it around her shoulders and sat beside him on the steps, the child pressing against the inside of her ribs, like a fist knocking on the door of the world. "You scared?" he asked. She nodded once. "Some days I feel brave. Others I feel like a lie wearing skin." He glanced at her, then the sky. "Brave people feel both." She looked at him, eyes soft. "I wasn't supposed to keep this child," she said. "Not by their rules, but I did. Not out of defiance. Just because it felt like the only thing left that belonged to me." He nodded, quiet. "When my wife was dying," he said slowly, "I held her hand, told her I'd find a way to feel again. Lied mostly. And now," he looked at her, the moonlight threading her hair silver. "Now I'm learning that grief don't every acre." The next day the child kicked so hard she winced. He caught her before she stumbled. "You all right?" he asked. She laughed through her teeth. "Just means it's strong." They prepared a cot in the corner room, fresh sheets, boiled water, a chair for the midwife they hadn't found yet. "You'll need help," he said. "I'll have you," she answered. He didn't know what to say, so he nodded. And when she touched his hand, he didn't pull away. Later that week, a letter arrived addressed to her. She read it on the porch, face unreadable. "What is it?" he asked. She folded the paper slow. "Invitation of sorts." He waited. "They're meeting in town, men with ties and clean boots. The ones who think they still own the land my child will inherit." His brow furrowed. "You going?" "I have to," she said. "Can't run from the soil your name is written into." She looked at him, and her voice went low. "They think I'm a ghost. Something they buried." He stood beside her, arm brushing hers. "Then show 'em you haunt just fine." The next morning she braided her hair, dressed in her mother's coat, and tied her boots slow and steady. He watched from the porch as she saddled up her stomach, heavy, her spine straight. "You sure you're up for this?" he asked. She turned to him. "I've walked alone longer than they ever rode." He held out a coin for luck, he said. She smiled, then reeled deep like the sun behind a storm. "I already found mine," she said. "You just haven't noticed." And with that, she rode toward town, one at her back, eyes set forward. He watched her go, heart clenching, something old and wounded breaking loose inside him. The porch felt too quiet, the rooms too still. He picked up her sewing she'd left unfinished, a square of blue fabric, folded neat, laid it over his chest. Waited. The town's meeting hall wasn't grand, just a square of timber and nails sitting on a hill that overlooked more dirt than future. But today it was dressed in importance. Men had come in clean coats, papers had been stacked, coffee boiled black in a corner tin, and cigars hung lazy between fingers that had never held anything heavier than a ledger. He rode in slow, hitched the horse, kept his hat low badge tucked in his coat. He wasn't here to make noise, but they noticed him anyway. "Sheriff," someone muttered. "Not anymore," he answered, eyes never leaving the building. She came an hour later, not in rags, not in travel-worn shawls or stitched dresses. She came in black wool and silver buttons, her boots polished, her braid tight, a quiet storm in human shape. Her belly led her proud and full. Her jaw was set, her silence louder than any man's voice in that hall. They turned to stare, every one of them, some with confusion, others with recognition that stung. She walked to the front past them all, as if their stares were no heavier than prairie wind. A tall man stood near the center table, round face, wide belt, voice like a sermon dipped in vinegar. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "This is a business matter." She looked at him with the calm of someone who'd already buried worse. "I am the business," she said. Laughter rippled. A few cleared throats. One man stood as if to escort her out. Then she placed the documents on the table. Deeds, ownership papers, land rights signed by her grandfather and authenticated by a notary older than any man in the room. "My name is still inked on every rail between here and the mountain pass," she said. "My child will inherit more than shame and silence." The laughter stopped. The man blinked. That land was forfeited. Lost. Stolen, she corrected. Buried under threats and lies. But I dug it up. She turned slowly, eyes catching each face. "You called me unfit. You turned me away. Made me think I had no worth beyond what a husband might claim. But I am not a wife abandoned. I am a mother with a deed. A woman with fire still left to burn." The air shifted. She laid a single letter down. "My grandfather's last will. The railroad shares returned to me the day I carried an heir. Which I do. Which I will." The lawman watched from the back, arms crossed, throat tight. He didn't know this version of her, not entirely, but some part of him had always believed she carried more than sorrow. The tall man turned red. "You think any of us will let you dictate terms?" She leaned in. "I'm not here to ask," someone whispered. "She owns the southern stretch, the junction." Her voice lowered, and with it the power to reroute every train, to pull steel from your towns, to send prosperity elsewhere. Murmurs rose like smoke, hands clenched. One man stepped forward with fingers twitching near his coat. The lawman moved fast. He was beside her in 3 steps, hand resting on his holster without drawing. "You best think twice," he said. The man backed down. She didn't flinch. "You followed me," she said, eyes still ahead. "I stayed close," he answered. One of the councilmen cleared his throat. "What do you want?" She turned slowly. 3 things, she said. A schoolhouse for widows and daughters, a doctor's post for expectant mothers, and the rest I'll build tracks, but not for profit, for freedom. They gaped. "You'd waste it all," someone spat. "I'd invest it," she said, "in the kind of future where girls like me don't have to be rescued by silence." Then she looked at him, and something passed between them. Not love, not yet, but the root of it. They left the building together, doors swinging behind them like a benediction. She said nothing until they reached the horse. "I didn't expect you to come," he shrugged. "Didn't expect you to rise like that either." "I was always rising," she said. "Just needed someone not to hold me down." That night the wind shifted again. Labor came early. He found her near the hearth, doubled over, hands white-knuckled around the chair. He didn't panic. He moved, water, cloth, boiling pots. A nearby midwife called, but too far to reach in time. "You've done hard things," he whispered, "but this is something holy." She nodded through gritted teeth. "Just stay," she said. "Don't go." "I won't," he promised. "Not now. Not again." The hours blurred. She screamed once, bit back the rest. He held her hand, wiped her brow, whispered stories from the trail from before pain had rewritten her. Then a cry. Sharp. No. Alive. The child was born just past dawn. He caught it, wrapped it, placed it in her arms as if delivering fire to a goddess. Her tears fell like river water. He touched her cheek. "You did it," he said. She looked up at him, something ancient in her gaze. "We did." In the days that followed, the town changed. The railroad didn't abandon them, but it bent to her vision. And her name, once whispered with doubt, became legend. She stayed in his home filled. It painted the walls, planted lilacs by the steps, rocked the baby by firelight. One morning he handed her a small carved box. She opened it, inside his badge, and beneath it a ring, modest, warm, unspoken. He didn't say the words, didn't need to. She placed it on her finger, then wrapped his hand in hers. "You're not just the man who gave up his seat," she said. "You're the man who gave me room to breathe." And in the quiet that followed, something bloomed. The house no longer mourned. It lived. And on a night years later, when the fire crackled low, and the child, now laughing, walking, danced across the porch in bare feet, she looked at him and whispered, "Turns out heaven ain't a place. It's a moment, and you made one." He kissed her hand, held it against his chest, and let the past rest finally in peace. The story ends here, friend. But the tracks she built, they're still running. And if you listen real quiet on a warm wind night, you might just hear the whistle carrying her name. Which city are you watching our video from? Please leave a comment. Please subscribe to the channel as well. Thank you.